I know how to speak, but we're going to see if I know how to work the PowerPoint. Thank you, Janet, for setting me back. We'll see. I'm going to advance forward because we're going to turn now and talk with local officials. I got it, okay. We're going to hear from local officials, and I know for everyone in the room, housing attainability is not news, and I know also for our local officials, it is not news. And so we have a few words from Congressman Derek Kilmer that he recorded for us. So we're all going to watch and see if Megan can figure out how to do this PowerPoint to hit the video just right. It's just like when I was going to the top of the hour back when I worked in radio. Can I hit the newscast before I run out? We'll try it one more time. Click.
Hello, everyone. Derek Kilmer here, U.S. Representative for Washington's 6th Congressional District, where you are right now. I can't begin to tell you how jealous I am that you are all in the vastly superior, far more beautiful Washington. But I'm honored to join you for this important event from afar. I first want to shout out the incredible work of Dr. Ali Medeiros and the University of Washington Tacoma. They are game changers and amazing partners in strengthening our communities. I'd also like to thank Dr. Medeiros for asking me to provide this 45-minute video. Excuse me, this 4 to 5 minute video. Your discussion there today matters. Since entering Congress, I've traveled from pillar to post across our region and heard a very similar observation from folks in South Tacoma, down in Grays Harbor County, and all the way north on the Olympic Peninsula. We are facing a crisis of housing affordability and attainability. Tens of millions of Americans are feeling the squeeze, spending over 30% of their income on housing and struggling to cover other costs. And others are struggling to find housing that adequately protects their health and safety. So, what do we do about it? In the 4 minutes I have left, let me suggest 4 things. Number 1, we need more workforce housing, more senior housing, more homeless housing, and more affordable housing. We need a whole lot more housing units, period. I wish I could tell you that there was a silver bullet to getting more units online, but I think it's more like silver buckshot. There's a whole bunch that we need to do. For a start, as the federal government discusses investments in infrastructure, it should be looking at a major new investment to build, preserve, and rehab several million units that can and should be affordable to low-income Americans. To help finance this construction, I'm a co-sponsor of a bill designed to significantly increase the impact of the low-income housing tax credit. Estimates show that this bill alone would create more than 550,000 new units. We also know that there are vital programs through the Department of Housing and Urban Development that provide access to affordable housing. Community Development Block Grants, Home Investment Partnership Program, and the Self-Help Home Ownership Program support the vital work done by our housing authorities and expand access to affordable housing. As someone who's on the Appropriations Committee, I've been pushing hard for these investments, and in fact last year we saw a $4.9 billion increase in these HUD housing programs. That's a start, but it's not enough. And sadly, we're having to play a whole lot of defense. In fact, the President's proposed budget for 2021 calls for the elimination of most of these programs, claiming that local communities are better equipped to address these challenges. Well, not on their own they aren't. Now, I don't say that in a partisan way, but more as a statement of fact, and I believe it would be wrong-headed for the federal government to cease being a partner in working to increase attainable housing throughout the country. Okay, number 2. Outside of funding housing units, the federal government can take some steps to enable more housing construction. For instance, we need more home builders. The federal government can take actions to ensure that we have enough folks with enough skill to build new homes and the infrastructure that supports them. As your representative, I've been focused on new federal policies to support career and tech ed programs, apprenticeships, and other efforts that will encourage folks to enter the trades. In addition, while land use decisions are made at the local level, the federal government can provide some incentives to local governments to reduce discriminatory policies and increase affordability through multifamily housing, transit-oriented development, and allowing for accessory dwelling units. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of Denny Heck's bill, the Yes in My Backyard Act. Number 3. It's important to empower renters and those seeking to buy a home. Here's a start. Let's increase access to Section 8 vouchers and guaranteed rental assistance to the Americans in the greatest need. That seems wiser than reducing access to these vouchers by 25%, as the President's budget has proposed. How about the federal government support local communities that provide legal assistance to tenants facing eviction and set up eviction diversion programs, including mediation and payment plans? The best way to help people who are homeless is to keep them out of homelessness in the first place. And finally, number 4, we need to make sure that as we work to grow our economy, there are more good jobs and that work actually pays. Before I ran for office, I worked right in Tacoma for the Economic Development Board. And though my business card has changed, my laser-focused commitment to fighting for economic opportunity for more people in more places has remained the same. I'm pushing for tax reform that would help working people. I sponsored legislation to dramatically increase the earned income tax credit, to help make work pay more, and to provide tax relief for meeting basic expenses like childcare. Beyond that, I've sponsored a bill to increase the federal minimum wage and to ensure equal pay for equal work, because we know that there are gender pay inequities. I've sponsored bills to expand access to quality, affordable health care, because we know that too many people are an illness or an accident away from going broke. It's important that we recognize that we cannot decouple the issues of inadequate housing attainability and economic inequality. There are too many folks living paycheck to paycheck who are just one bump in the road away from experiencing housing insecurity. Listen, I could have talked about a dozen other issues here, but 5 minutes. I guess the main point I want to make is that increasing access to attainable housing will require a multi-layered policy approach, with the federal government acting as a partner to local communities. Part of what gives me hope is this very event, an awesome opportunity for our community to come together and really dive in on a complex and urgent problem. Please know that my office is ready to carry on this fight in the halls of Congress. And if you ever have ideas, thoughts, insights into how I can be a better advocate for attainable housing, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again for what you're doing. Let's get to work.
Congressman Derek Kilmer. And now I'd like to invite up our panel of local elected officials. We have Mayor Woodards, Mayor Victoria Woodards from the city of Tacoma. We have Mayor Nancy Backus from the city of Auburn. And we have Bruce Dammeier, Pierce County Executive. Thanks so much for coming up. As you take your seats and elbow bump, I'd like to just give you a sense of how this conversation has gone so far. What we just heard from Derek Kilmer really hits on what Janet Smith had presented to us about the spectrum of ways that attainable housing is being addressed. On one side, we've got build attainable housing, and on the other side, the idea of make housing attainable. So we've been talking so far about that two-pronged approach of building more housing, but also building workers' ability to get housing and afford housing. And I wanted to let you guys know just a couple points that had come up as we've talked so far. One of the pieces of data that Allie pointed out is that in our region, as incomes have risen by 12%, the cost of housing has risen by 100%. And in 2018, Tacoma surpassed the national home price. And a majority of Pierce County workers cannot afford housing without being cost burdened. So our conversation so far has really centered on that idea of 30% of your income being spent on housing as being a critical way of not being cost burdened. Although we just had the idea brought up, maybe we need to change that definition and say 35% is cost burdened. So these are some of the ideas that have been coming up so far in our conversation. And I thank all of you for making the time today to come and give us a sense of what's happening locally. And I'd like to start, Mayor Backus, with you, because I learned something new today after living here for 20 years. I did not know that Auburn crossed over into Pierce County. So it's a big day for everybody. But the majority of Auburn is in King County, and you've been active in addressing housing issues. In 2018, you joined One Table in King County, and that's a regional approach to tackling the issues of homelessness and housing affordability, bringing together many community players to collaborate on solutions to the crisis. So that was back in 2018. What's an action you've taken recently that has, for you think this is a major move for us to improve housing attainability?
So there's a lot going on regionally, and I'd heard earlier that you weren't using the county to the north name, so I'll try and be respectful of that. 10,000 of our people are in Pierce County, and 72,000 are in that county to the north. So
The best 10,000 are in Pierce County?
Yes. Well, so
This is being recorded.
Yeah. So I live in that county to the north, but I love our people in both counties. How's that? We have great people in both. Auburnites are great people. So the One Table approach was supposed to identify the root causes of homelessness and to be able to prevent those. That work is ongoing. There is also, many of you have probably heard, the new Regional Homeless Authority, the regional governance model that was approved through an ILA with Seattle and, I'm just going to do it, King County, back in December. And recently they have identified the board, which is made up of the mayor and 2 council members from Seattle, the county executive and 2 county council members, and then there are 3 Sound City Association members, and I was appointed to be on that board because I have been fighting for a sub-regional approach. We know that what works in the main city in your county is not going to be the approach that works in the smaller cities. So I've been fighting to ensure that our voices are heard at that table and that the funding is made appropriate for what's needed in all of the areas within our county. And at the city level, we have been working on a one-stop shop, if you will, an approach for providing services to those who are currently unsheltered, but also to help prevent those that are on the verge of perhaps homelessness and providing services to them as well. We will have that operational very soon. We just signed a long-term lease to get that up and running. And so we're also looking at different ordinances, resolutions that we have within our city. What can we do, like the accessory dwelling units? Can we have 1 or maybe 5 different plans and have those automatically approved as opposed to having people have to go through a long approval process? What about property tax abatement for a few years if someone is going to build that ADU? So we're looking at a lot of different approaches within the city.
Thank you. Mayor Woodards, the city of Tacoma has been very active in addressing the needs for housing attainability, and that includes developing an affordable housing action strategy in 2008. It was designed as a 10-year implementation guide. So what's the most important action you've been able to take recently to improve that attainability?
So I just want to make one small correction, because if it was done in 2008, 10 years, we'd have been done 2 years ago. But unfortunately, that's not the case. 2018 is when we passed the AHAs, which is known as our affectionate name for the Affordable Housing Action Strategy. So there are a couple of things that we've done. One is that we have set aside $1.2 million that we're going to use and excuse me, my mind is on 2 million different things this morning, unfortunately. But we set aside $1.2 million. We're also using the 1406 money. We did work with the county. The state authorized a refund of sales tax to cities who want to build affordable housing, and we suggest that over 10 years, that 1406 money would net $17 million to the city of Tacoma to build affordable housing. So those are a couple things we've done immediately, but really I think the most important thing we've done is we've done the AHAs, but we're implementing the AHAs. So the strategies that we thought were important, number one, bringing more housing to Tacoma. And then number two, making sure that people who are in their houses can stay in their homes. And then number three, reducing barriers for people who want to get into home ownership. So I think the items that we identified as our priorities, the actionable things, are things that we've actually done. I would add, just for information, that since we've done our Affordable Housing Action Strategy, May 2019 through January 2020, we have actually received 86 applications for, that's for accessory dwelling units. So we've received 86 applications for accessory dwelling units, because we're also building ADUs in Tacoma. The other thing that we're doing in partnership with Tacoma Housing Authority is we've got the Arlington Drive Youth Campus that's coming online, which will include 58 affordable housing apartments for young adults and a 12-bed emergency shelter for homeless youth. We are also excited about the Mercy Housing development that's going to be happening in Hilltop. The piece about that I think is really important is that the housing that the Mercy Housing program is going to bring forth is actually, there are going to be 60 units available at 50% AMI. And I think as we continue to talk about affordable housing, we have got to have real conversations about what affordable really means, because right now the way affordable housing is defined at 80% AMI, that's not affordable. And so as we continue this conversation, I think that's something that we have to continue to talk about. And then I'll just add that between 2017 and 2019, we had 271 new single-family homes that have been built in Tacoma, and 1,166 multifamily homes were added to Tacoma's housing stock. The unfortunate thing is that out of all those homes, only 127 are under the affordability restriction, which means 80% AMI not affordable. But we are picking up momentum because of the work and our focus through the AHAs. Right now, there are 5,075 new units in permitting or planned over the next 3 years, which will include 845 affordable units that are 80% below. But again, I think working on that definition is something we haven't been able to do, and that's a nut that we've got to crack.
The definition of what is affordable or
Affordable,
attainable.
absolutely.
And before you were able to arrive, as Janet Smith was talking, she shared a slide that in Pierce County, in order to afford housing, the wage now is $24.33 an hour to be able to afford housing. And as I mentioned, one of Allie's slides showed that the majority of wage earners in Pierce County cannot afford housing without being cost burdened.
And if I could add just one thing, Pierce County's AMI is $72,000. Tacoma's AMI is $52,000. But we're required to use the AMI of the county. So even when you look at 80% of what the county's AMI is, that still doesn't get to the AMI of what Tacoma residents actually make.
Thank you. Well, Executive Dammeier, we're talking about Pierce County, and that is your vantage point. You see much broader than any city, being the executive of Pierce County. And last year, you announced that county was looking at things like targeted fee waivers and density incentives to encourage building. What has come about most recently you've been able to put into place to improve housing attainability?
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. First of all, before we get going, Mayor Woodards, is there anything going on tonight that the community should be aware of?
Well, at 6:30, you will get to hear my State of the City address, and I'm running in between of taping that because we're going to do just out of an abundance of caution. We want to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy. That's our number one paramount duty. So we are taping the State of the City this morning to be aired this afternoon, so everybody can sit in the comfort of their own living room and watch my State of the City address at 6:30.
And for those of you who don't know the mayor, she is a hugger. And I was very impressed this morning that when I extended my elbow, she gave me an elbow bump. So that she is really outside her comfort zone right now. So thank you for helping us model good behavior in terms of this current environment we're in. So I guess I want to start off with thank you for your comment. I want to kind of go back to the 30,000 foot level, if I might. And I want to do that by sharing a story that I learned yesterday at Habitat for Humanity's annual lunch. They are one of many amazing nonprofits we have. I see Michael Mira out there and a bunch of other folks, but I'm looking at Maureen Fife right now. And the story that was very powerful to me was about Rosa and Miguel. Rosa and Miguel they immigrated to this country. One of them came first. It was 10 years before the other could afford to come. They were one of Habitat for Humanity's kind of earliest homes. And they had the sweat equity. They put all that in. They did it. And the thing that was amazing yesterday is the video was celebrating that Rosa and Miguel made their final mortgage payment, that they owned their house free and clear. And what was really exciting about it is there was a picture on the front porch or the stairs leading up to their home with their entire family there, and it was a big family. And that's important. This is significant because the house is for most people their number one asset, and it is the number one opportunity for wealth accumulation and for transferring that to the next generation. And we need to understand, among other things, that the affordability and attainability issues we're talking about fall disproportionately on our communities of color, disproportionately now on seniors, disproportionately on our disabled community. So this is more than an academic exercise. It's really kind of it's fighting for the core of who we are as a community.
So
and
what
now
action,
I'll answer your
Yeah,
question.
what actions have you been able to take?
But I thought it was important for us to remember that. That's what this is about. That's exactly what this is about. Because folks, when you talk about who's getting squeezed out the bottom of our market, it's not the well-off, right? The people who are getting squeezed out are those who have the least ability to stay in. So a couple of things that we are doing. We've done many things I would love to talk about. The mayor and I and Councilmember Connie Ladenburg have been convening mayors to get together. We have been looking at, in Pierce County, we have done kind of a landlord liaison program. We're trying to engage private sector landlords engaged in it. We've revised for the second time our housing affordability incentives. But I want to tell you the thing that we're doing right now that I'm the most excited about is we've recognized that, among other things, government and our regulations and our codes and all of those kind of things, and in many cases, every code decision was made for a good reason at the time, but they start accumulating, and they make housing, in many cases, unaffordable. So the latest thing that we have done is I have challenged my very innovative planning and public works department, challenged the planners and the keepers of the code to find a way to get what we're calling 10 fee simple lots so people can own the homes kind of on 1 acre. What would be necessary in changing our code to allow that kind of things to happen, at least as a pilot, if not broader than that we've got to really look hard. If we need more and more types of housing, if we want to get housing units that are affordable that people can buy under $200,000, we've got to really look at radically changing or allowing flexibility unlike anything we've done before. So I think that's a great challenge for them. They are hot on it, looking at the variety of different ways to do that, so we can come up with ways, get in some cases, the flexibility necessary to allow the creation of affordable units that people can buy and begin that wealth accumulation and transfer going forward.
So looking at codes, and just to make sure to have more greater density on the lots?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And recognizing that housing affordability is a really important priority and should be a goal for our community, as much as many of the other things that we do, that needs to rise to that level of importance.
So you will have an opportunity to ask questions. I'd like to invite you, if you have questions of these local electeds, to ask about what's being done, ideas that you'd like to know if that's something that's on the horizon or something that is feasible locally. Please step on up to the microphone and I'll give you an opportunity to ask a question. As people move towards or stampede towards the microphones, I do want to pose one more question to our panel. And Mayor Woodards, I'd like to start with you. You've got a lot going on with the AHA. What do you think is the biggest barrier you're facing at your level to doing more?
Resources. I mean, I think it's what we're all facing, and I think it's both financial resources, but let's be real. We're not making any more land. And so in an urban dwelling, in an urban place like Tacoma, even resources without the land and ability to build can be an issue. So I think resources is the number one, and then how we build, where we build and how we build, and how we incorporate density into figuring out how we get enough housing in Tacoma for all of the people who are moving here.
Thank you. Mayor Backus, what about for you?
I would agree with that. In the last year and a half, we've had over 1,500 units of affordable housing that at 50 to 80% of AMI come online. But land is incredibly scarce, at least that land that is easily buildable. Right? The topography in Auburn, we have the valley people and we have the hill people. And nothing in between, and so most of that land that's left is very challenging to build on, and so it's tasking our team with what are we willing to accept and still ensure the safety of those that are going to be living in housing that is built on that land. And density, right? Density is an issue. Our downtown core, we have identified as one of our areas for higher density. And so we have 400 units, it's TOD, so the transit-oriented development downtown. We have 500 more units that are in the process of being built right now. So it's identifying those areas where you are going to provide the additional density, as Mayor Woodard was saying, and trying to figure out the best use for that land that is available, but challenging ourselves to come up with new and creative ways of being able to utilize that land. We work with the master builders of both King and Snohomish and Pierce County. We have regular meetings with them, and we are always looking for those new innovative ideas on how do we best provide the housing at a reasonable price for people.
Thank you. And Executive Dammeier, they're both hitting on a point you were just saying about getting that density in with land, and you've asked your planning group to look at that code. If you've already got them looking at the code, what do you think for you is the biggest barrier to doing more?
So I would say, to some degree, public perception. There is, you have a word up there that says attainable. In many people, we talk about affordable housing versus housing affordability. There are too many people in our community, I think, that believe this is a problem for the poor in our community. And that is, while it is for those with modest incomes or very limited incomes, it is also for our seniors. It is also for kind of first-time homeowners, singles, kind of people who are beginning their family wage career. So we've got to get people to understand this is much broader than what they may think as we talk about kind of filling in the missing middle in terms of housing. The second thing I would say is the status quo, in the sense that, and that has kind of two pieces really quick. One is that everybody who wants change welcomes change in the town next door. They don't want change in their neighborhood. And we all need to recognize that our neighborhoods are going to change, and they have always changed, they will change, and that's good. But we've got to overcome that NIMBYism approach, that I don't want anything different in my single family home kind of neighborhood, that we've got to broaden that understanding of folks, that's good. And that shows up most formally in many cases in building codes. Our building codes are really designed around producing, and our setbacks and our wetland policy, and all these are designed around certain things. And all those things are working against being able to build truly affordable housing. And we've got to be able to do that. The private sector has got to be able to, that's the only way we build enough housing to really impact this, is for the private sector to be able to engage and produce the kind of units that we need.
Thank you. So we've got at least one person, and we'll have time for a few more questions. So yes, please step on up.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is Ashley, and I work at the University of Washington, Seattle, but I've lived my entire life in Pierce County. I'm one of the 75% that transits out of Pierce County every single day for work, and I'm cost burdened. I'm low income. I'm also housing insecure for most of my life. And to give perspective to this and why I came to this meeting today is I know this forum has been happening, but I wanted to learn more about what the discussions are happening at all the different policy levels that you guys are mentioning this morning. But some questions I have is, I appreciate the focus on the city levels, but I'm wanting to hear more about what's happening in the rural parts of Pierce County around this, and what initiatives or community members are being engaged and actively part of this process, because as we see growth management spread out, those areas are also getting built up. We can see that happening, like say in Frederickson and things like that, close to where I live in Puyallup, and I'm curious to hear more about that. The other part of it is, when we're talking about these discussions and we're talking about, Black, Indigenous people of color, low-income seniors, or like any of the disabled community, I'm wanting to understand a little bit more about some of the legislative understandings of how different cultures perceive living ability. So for instance, like I work in the Marshallese community that's in Auburn and Federal Way. And so you have people coming from the diaspora coming to Washington, maybe it's their first time, they're often young, and they're living between households, right? Between different family members. It might be an auntie and it might be just a family friend. So they live between these different spaces, and I'm wanting to understand if anybody at these policy levels are really actually considering some of these narratives, because that's similar to my life. I live between two divorced family members and any other friends or family on a given basis, depending on if I'm working in Seattle or down or somewhere else on any given basis. And so wondering how that plays in, because we're cost burdened and also not able to afford rent or to be able to buy our first home. So I'm trying to understand a little bit more about that. So if you could speak to any of those points, that'd be really enlightening.
Thank you. And so, Executive Dammeier, can we take that first question first about what's being done in rural areas? Because we do hear about cities, but what's being done in the areas outside of the main cities?
Yeah, just a couple of things that we're working on, and to kind of set the stage for that. As I mentioned, Mayor Woodards and I and Councilmember Lagberg have convening 13 mayors from throughout the county and coming together, approaching it kind of regionally. We've created kind of an organization called SHAPE, and the whole objective there is that we need to come up with kind of a series of policies, a toolkit, if you will, and the understanding that we all don't need to do exactly the same thing, but we all need to do something, and these policies need to work together. They need to not conflict, they need to work together. With respect to Pierce County in particular, one of the things we are actively in the process of right now is an entire new, actually we're in the third year of working a community plan that encompasses the largest kind of suburban, almost urban pieces of Pierce County. By that I mean Parkland, Spanaway, Midland, South Hill, where there's not a city, but it is very a significant population out there. And our approach is to reinforce the transportation, our investments in the transportation network, and allow greater density and greater affordability of housing along the major transportation routes. And with some view that someday there may be a city of Frederickson, not today, but that could be in the future. When you look beyond that, right, we're looking at getting kind of more transit into areas. Think of Tahale and the houses up there. But the real challenge in affordability is people are driving till they qualify, right? They're driving until they find affordable. So we are working really hard to create more affordable units within unincorporated Pierce County, within our kind of growth management area, not out in the what some people might consider rural, but within our kind of urban developing area, and collaborating really closely with the cities.
Thank you. And so, Mayor Backus, I'm wondering if you've been working with the collaboration in King County, and that's included government, business leaders, service providers, philanthropists, people with lived experience as well. And I'm wondering if you might have some insight into the second half of the question about getting that input from a diverse group of populations.
Absolutely, and I think with this regional governance model, having the lived experience as a very vital part of that governing body is going to be critical. In fact, later today, I'm going to be up in Seattle reviewing applications for those with lived experience for the 3 members that are going to be appointed to that board, talking about different communities and the different needs for housing. We work with the Marshallese, the Pacific Islanders in our community. In 2015, there was a study, and it was done by that county up north, and it showed some very, very alarming trends. On this map of the entire county, the northern portion of the county was blue. The southern portion of the county, where we are, is red. And I will tell you, regardless of your political affiliation, red was not good on this map. It showed that our life expectancy was 10 years less. We had higher rates of diabetes, higher rates of suicide. All of these factors played into us creating a community blue ribbon committee, Auburn, the healthiest city in Washington by 2020. I don't know if we're going to be there, but if we didn't start, we were never going to get anywhere. And the Marshallese population, the Latinx population, very critical people for us to be in contact with and to understand what their needs are, not just what I think housing should be or what I've grown up with, but what everyone in our community is understanding of housing to be, and being respectful of that and providing for different opportunities of 3, 4, 5 generations of family living together. That's not unusual in other cultures, and we need to be mindful and respectful of that when we are doing our own our code updates. And so just making sure that those, there is a saying that Mayor Ralph of Kent has used recently, and I think it is so appropriate. That which is done for me, but without me, is done to me. We always have to keep that in mind, that if we are going to be talking about what the needs of our community and our region are, it can't just be elected officials sitting up here thinking we know what it is. We have to engage with all of you to hear what your needs are so that we can address those, or we are failing in our jobs.
Thank you. And Mayor Woodards, I know the Affordable Housing Action Strategy also had a big layer of community input and connections. How about here in Tacoma? What are you seeing and what are you doing to make sure that all those voices are heard?
I think some of the same things that you've just heard, and Nancy, I'm stealing that saying, because I am a person who truly believes that if you want to know how to solve a problem, ask the people who are experiencing it. They can give you the best advice that you'll ever get on how to solve it. And too often, as it was just said, we think we know what that is, and we don't. So in putting the AHAs together, we made sure that we had every voice at the table, so that we put together a plan that we will still do check-ins, but that we could move with, right? And that, I want to be really clear, we call it the Affordable Housing Action Strategy. It is not just another document. It's not a study that we did so we could better understand. There are actually points that we can actually do and move the needle. And that was created both with people who have expertise in working in this area, but also with people who are experiencing the housing affordability crisis. And I'm going to stop my answer right there because I want to make sure we get to people's questions. So
we've got more opportunity to hear.
Okay.
Were you? Yes, go ahead, here over on the left side.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Tommy, I work for the City of Tacoma in the Land Use Department. And coming to these forums and being involved in the conversation, a lot of it is focused on affordable rental housing. And it was touched on a little bit earlier that homeownership builds equity for families and in communities. And so I'm curious to know, when we're building more units, most of our focus, from what I've heard and experienced, is on rental units. And I'm curious to know if there's kind of what strategies and implementations have you seen or do you know of or are you implementing that are encouraging more home ownership and building more equity in the communities rather than having more of a just a rental market with less homeownership options.
Thank you. Executive Dammeier, you've been doing a lot as you were talking about getting that greater density. Is that regulation you're asking your planning group to look at, is it centered on ownership or rental?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say there's a kind of a multi-pronged approach, right? There is some that will be government kind of primarily build. If you think about supports for, in many of cases for some of our disabled community, they're going to need kind of more supports. There's going to be some that will be public and private partnership, I think. But to get the kind of numbers that we're talking about, it's got to be private, and to make the kind of community transformation that we want, you've got to build in the home ownership element. So when we're looking at these, as we're talking about the challenge to kind of 10 units on 1 acre that allows fee simple buying the land, buying the house, and then maybe some common areas as well, that's the kind of work that we need to do because it allows that kind of wealth. I would tell you that I think Habitat, the Woods project off of Golden Given is a great example of that kind of an approach. The other thing that I would say, one of our strategies that we have been actively using is trying to keep people in their currently affordable homes when they may be on a fixed income and their costs are increasing. A great example of that is our effort to go in and make homes more energy efficient. We can invest money. It's about $14,000 a unit in Pierce County when we do this. We can reduce the amount of energy that they spend, make their house kind of safer and more effective going forward, and put money back in their budget for doing that. In that case, that's a win-win-win, and those folks stay in that affordable housing as opposed to being priced out. So that's one of many strategies we have going.
Thank you. And so we have one more question before we're done. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joyce Stanford. I'm with Shared Housing Services here in Tacoma. We service the entire Pierce County, and I haven't heard you say anything about the west side of the bridge. Unbeknownst to people, Gig Harbor and Key Peninsula are part of Pierce County, and I live in Gig Harbor, so I felt it was my duty to stand up here and ask you, what's going on there? How can we get more infrastructure over there? Part of the issue for me, trying to encourage more home providers to open up their home on the Key Peninsula and in Gig Harbor, is there's no transportation. So anyone who lives over there has to have a car. Well, guess what? I've got a young lady that's over there. When I say young lady, but 69-year-old living in her car. I've got no home provider for her. So if you're talking about affordable housing, we're a great option to keep people in place to age in their home and to share affordable housing. But how can I do that when the infrastructure isn't there? So that's great. We're talking about housing, but you have to go out a little bit too. It's mental health, it's transportation, it's education, it's jobs, it's wages, it's all of that in combination with the affordable housing. And I'd like to see that done at the county level. I know they're doing it in Tacoma. We've got great home providers in Tacoma, but I really need Pierce County to step up and be like, we are here for you. We know that you are at the table with us talking about this. Thank you.
Executive Dammeier, I think that's your question. You had been talking to the east and about transportation and Frederickson there. What about the other side of the bridge?
So absolutely, it includes the other side of the bridge. Thank you, Joyce, for commenting on that. You know, Gig Harbor is involved, particularly in the Mayor's Roundtable, as one of the aspects. We have been working hard to expand the services, particularly mental health services and other services, out into the peninsula, in particular when you think about the Key. The biggest challenge out there, and I would totally agree with you, and I saw Sue Dreyer is back there as well. We've had this conversation many times. Getting public transit out into the Key Peninsula is a big challenge as we talk about kind of infrastructure, and that is something that we talk about kind of all around, because when you talk about affordable housing, it is housing, but it's the other aspects that make life affordable as well. And for many folks, you know, I talked about the community plans along the transit lines in Pierce County. As we lay that out, we do have to get kind of more transit out to the Key Peninsula. So I appreciate that comment. We're working on it, but I don't have a great answer for you today on transit. But thank you. If you don't know, the Key is an amazing place. That community steps up and addresses many of their own issues. One of the things they do now for lack of transit, the school buses, which go up and down the Key, when they are not transporting students, they will pick up transit riders along there. So that's we need to get transit out there more formally than that, but they are finding ways to get stuff done. Thank you, Joyce.
Well, thank you all for participating. We've got a lot more ideas from around the country up ahead, but I want to thank our local electeds for joining us today. Mayor Victoria Woodards of Tacoma, Executive Bruce Dammeier, and Mayor Nancy Backus from Auburn. We have a brief break coming up. Do you want a short break? Back at 10:45.